I looked at the bank notification on my phone, and for a moment, I thought it was a mistake. A sudden transfer of $5 million had been deposited into my account from an unknown source. I could barely process the numbers flashing on the screen. I'm Ethan, a 35-year-old accountant in a small but bustling city. My life has always been steady, albeit uneventful. I work in a corporate office, crunching numbers for a living. My personal life? I've been married to Clara for almost 4 years. She's the love of my life, or at least, I thought so. Clara and I met years ago when I was still in college. She came from a prestigious family with deep ties to the city's wealthiest elites. Her father, James Knight, is the CEO of a multinational corporation, and her mother, Isabel, is a well-known socialite. Their wealth and status are the things that shaped Clara's worldview, and while I appreciated her kindness, I always felt like an outsider in her world of extravagant parties and high society events. Before we married, Clara's parents made one thing clear: they expected me to sign a prenup. At the time, I didn't think much of it. The contract ensured that any property or wealth I brought into the marriage would be mine, but anything Clara inherited or earned during our marriage, including lottery winnings or other substantial financial gains, would remain solely hers. I agreed, thinking I was marrying for love, not money, and that the prenup would never matter. But then, one quiet afternoon in June, everything changed. Clara called me, her voice laced with excitement. "Ethan, you won't believe it. I've just received $5 million from an investment I made last year. I didn't think it would pan out, but it did." I was initially skeptical. Clara had always been cautious with her investments, so this sudden windfall was a shock. But as she described the details of the deal, a cryptocurrency project that had skyrocketed, I began to grasp the magnitude of it. She was ecstatic, and I shared in her joy, imagining all the things we could do with this newfound wealth. But soon after, her behavior started to change. A few days later, Clara started acting distant. She seemed unusually secretive and began taking long phone calls late at night. When I asked her about it, she simply shrugged it off, saying everything was fine. But I noticed that her demeanor had shifted. Then, one evening after work, Clara sat me down. Her face was serious, the way it often gets when she has something important to say. "Ethan, I've been thinking," she began. "I think we should separate." I froze. I couldn't understand what was happening. I tried to reach out to her, to understand what had changed, but she was cold and distant. "What do you mean, separate? Is it about the money?" I asked. Her gaze was steady, but her voice trembled as she replied, "It's not just about the money. It's about what we've built, or haven't built. I've been thinking a lot about what my family expects from me, and I can't ignore it any longer." It felt like the ground had been ripped from beneath me. In that moment, I realized it wasn't just a simple marital issue, it was a battle over the fortune she had gained. Her family had always treated me with a sense of disdain, as if I was only a temporary figure in their world. But now, the real test was just beginning. Clara's parents had been pushing for a separation, a divorce that would strip me of any claim to the wealth she had just acquired. The prenup, which I had thought little of at the time, was now a weapon in their hands. As per the contract, everything Clara had gained during our marriage, including this sudden $5 million, would remain hers alone. But there was one clause I hadn't thought about, the one that allowed me to contest the agreement if I could prove there was a significant change in circumstances. And now, with this windfall, I had leverage. I began to hire lawyers, hoping to find a way to claim my rights over the wealth we had shared during our marriage. The legal battle was about to get ugly, and I knew the stakes were high. But the more I dug, the more I realized how deep Clara's family's influence went. They had connections with some of the best legal minds in the country. As I faced this uphill battle, I couldn't help but feel betrayed. Clara's coldness, the calculated way in which she was distancing herself from me, it all pointed to a harsh truth. I wasn't just fighting for money, I was fighting for the life I thought I had with her, a life that now seemed to be slipping away. The days that followed Clara's confession felt like a blur. I tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy, but it was clear that the world I had known was crumbling. Clara's cold demeanor haunted me, and the presence of her family's influence was suffocating. Every time I walked into our apartment, I could feel the tension hanging in the air. I couldn't believe it had come to this. Just a few weeks ago, Clara had been my partner, my confidant. Now, it felt as if I were fighting against an invisible force. The person I loved had become a stranger, and her family's agenda was more apparent than ever. I hired a lawyer, Amanda Griffin, one of the few attorneys in town who was known for taking on powerful families like the Knights. She was sharp, no nonsense, and had a reputation for winning against all odds. Our first meeting was in her sleek office downtown, a modern glass building that screamed success. "Ethan," she said, after I recounted the events. "You're not just dealing with Clara here. You're fighting her family. They have deep pockets and even deeper connections. The prenup will be a significant hurdle, but not impossible to overcome. If we can prove that there was fraud, or that Clara's actions were under duress or manipulation, we might have a chance." I nodded, feeling a sense of relief. At least now, I had someone in my corner. But as the days turned into weeks, the battle grew more intense. Clara's legal team, backed by her father's wealth, came at us with full force. Every letter, every call, every meeting felt like another attempt to break me down. They claimed the money she had won was hers under the terms of the prenup, and that there was no reason for me to contest it. Clara, on the other hand, avoided me. She stopped answering my calls, and when I did see her, it was as though she was a different person. A cold, distant shell of the woman I once loved. Her eyes, once warm with affection, now held only indifference. It wasn't just the money that was at stake anymore, it was my dignity, my sense of justice, and my love for her. But the more I tried to reach her, the more I realized she was no longer the woman I married. She had changed, and in her eyes, I was simply an obstacle standing between her and her new life. One evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, going through the latest batch of legal documents, I received an unexpected phone call. It was from Clara's mother, Isabel. "I know you're fighting this, Ethan," she began, her voice surprisingly calm. "But you need to understand that Clara is just trying to do what's best for herself. She's not a little girl anymore. She's learned from us, and she's making her own decisions." I listened, my grip tightening around the phone. "I don't understand. What happened to the woman I married? This isn't the Clara I knew." There was a long pause on the other end before Isabel spoke again. "I'm sorry, Ethan. But sometimes, people change. And you have to accept that. Clara isn't going to change her mind. This fight is going to tear you both apart." Her words stung, but I didn't back down. "I won't give up, Isabel. I love Clara, and I'm not going to let this be the end of everything we've built." The conversation ended abruptly, and I was left standing in my living room, filled with a mixture of anger, frustration, and sadness. Clara was not only slipping away from me, but now her mother was doing everything she could to convince me that I had lost her for good. Yet, I couldn't give up. Not without a fight. As the legal proceedings moved forward, I grew more and more entangled in a web of deceit. Clara's lawyers had started digging into my past, trying to find any weakness they could exploit. They even accused me of trying to manipulate Clara into signing the prenup under false pretenses. It was as if they were trying to paint me as the villain in this entire situation, and the public narrative began to shift in their favor. I turned to Amanda for advice, and she advised me to dig deeper into Clara's actions leading up to the cryptocurrency investment. If we could prove that Clara had been coerced into the investment by someone with ulterior motives, it might give us the leverage we needed to overturn the prenup. So, I started to investigate. I spent weeks poring over old emails, phone records, and documents. And then, I found something. Hidden in a set of emails from a year ago, there was a conversation between Clara and her father, James Knight. The emails were cryptic, but it was clear that Clara's father had been heavily involved in guiding her investment decisions, pushing her towards high-risk opportunities with promises of massive returns. It seemed that Clara hadn't acted entirely on her own when making the investment. There were hints of pressure, subtle suggestions that her family expected her to take these risks in order to prove her worth. And one email, dated just a few days before Clara made the investment, was especially troubling. James had written, "This could change everything for you. Think of it as an opportunity to elevate your position." I took the email to Amanda, and we both agreed that this was the key we needed. It wasn't just about the money anymore, it was about proving that Clara had been manipulated into making decisions that weren't in her best interest. We filed a motion to have the prenup reviewed, citing evidence of undue influence. But as the days went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing more than just a legal battle. The love I once had for Clara was fading, replaced by resentment and betrayal. I had fought so hard for us, but Clara's indifference was a cruel reminder that some things are beyond repair. The case was heating up, and so was my internal turmoil. With each passing day, I felt more like a pawn in a game I didn't want to be a part of. Clara's actions were increasingly erratic, and her attempts to distance herself from me were becoming more calculated. One night, as I was reviewing the latest court documents, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Clara. "Ethan, can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long time, unsure of how to respond. Was this just another attempt to manipulate me, or was it a genuine plea for reconciliation? I didn't know anymore. But something deep inside me told me that this conversation might be my last chance to salvage whatever was left of our marriage. I agreed to meet her the following evening. We chose a small cafe on the outskirts of the city, a neutral ground, far from the prying eyes of her family. When I arrived, Clara was already there, sitting at a corner table, her back turned toward me. She looked the same, but there was a coldness in the way she carried herself. Her hair was neatly styled, and her makeup was flawless, but there was a sense of emptiness behind her eyes. I took a seat across from her, unsure of what to say. "Ethan," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "I never wanted it to be like this. But you have to understand, my family, the pressure they put on me, it's too much. I never wanted to hurt you, but I don't think I can keep living this lie." I felt my heart break all over again. "Clara, this isn't just about the money. It's about us. What happened to the woman I married? The woman who loved me, who we built a life together. Where did she go?" She looked down at her hands, her fingers trembling. "I don't know. I don't know what happened to me either. But I've changed, Ethan. I can't go back. I've made my choice." I didn't know what to say. My mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, but all I could feel was the painful realization that the woman I loved, the woman I fought for, was lost to me forever. The money, the legal battle, it all seemed so trivial compared to the heartache I felt in that moment. "Then it's over?" I whispered, my voice cracking. She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm sorry." And just like that, my world fell apart. Ethan sat in the cafe for what felt like hours after Clara left, his mind a whirlpool of confusion and despair. The woman he had loved, the woman he had vowed to spend his life with, was now a stranger. Her final words echoed in his ears, "I've made my choice." The pain of betrayal, of losing everything he had worked so hard for, was almost unbearable. His heart ached for the life they had built together, the quiet nights at home, the shared dreams, the future they had planned. It was as though it had all been ripped away in the blink of an eye. As he walked back to his apartment, the weight of his thoughts pressed on him. The legal battle was still ongoing, but now it felt secondary to the emotional wreckage he was facing. He couldn't help but wonder if the fight was worth it anymore. Was he battling for justice, or for a lost dream? That night, he couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned, haunted by the images of Clara, the love they once shared and the cold woman she had become. His phone buzzed in the middle of the night. It was a message from Amanda. "We need to talk tomorrow. I have something important to show you." He sighed, knowing that the legal battle was far from over. But at that moment, it felt like the last thing on his mind. He stared at the message for a long time before finally turning his phone off and sinking back into his bed. There was no escaping the reality that had unfolded. His marriage was over, but his fight wasn't. The next day, Ethan met Amanda at her office, feeling a mix of exhaustion and frustration. He was ready to face whatever legal challenge she had prepared, but part of him wished he could just walk away from it all. The thought of facing Clara again, or her family, made his stomach churn. "Ethan," Amanda began, her voice sharp as ever. "I've been doing some digging into the Knight family. I think I've found something that could change everything." Ethan sat up straight, his curiosity piqued. "What is it?" Amanda slid a thick stack of documents across the table. "It's about Clara's father, James Knight. You've told me before about the emails, but there's something bigger. It turns out that James has been under investigation for financial misconduct. There are rumors, but nothing concrete, until now." She tapped a few papers, indicating a series of transactions that showed James had been moving large sums of money into offshore accounts. "If we can connect this to the cryptocurrency investment, it could prove that he manipulated Clara into making the investment with the intent to profit from it. This could be our leverage to invalidate the prenup, and force them to pay you a fair settlement." Ethan's heart raced. It was the breakthrough he had been hoping for, but as he stared at the evidence, a part of him wondered whether it was worth it. Did he still want to take this battle to the next level? Was the possibility of winning back his share of the wealth worth the emotional turmoil that had come with it? But then, something shifted in his mind. The fight wasn't just about money. It was about his dignity. He wouldn't let Clara's family manipulate him any longer. He wouldn't let them destroy him, even if it meant going up against them all. "I'll do whatever it takes," Ethan said, his voice firm. As the days passed, Ethan immersed himself in the case with renewed determination. He couldn't change the past, but he could fight for his future. Amanda's investigation had uncovered a new angle, and they worked tirelessly to gather more evidence. But as they moved forward, Ethan began to notice something strange. His own feelings toward Clara started to change. He had been angry, hurt, and betrayed. But now, with each passing day, he began to wonder if the anger was blinding him to something more important: closure. Maybe this wasn't about winning or losing. Maybe it was about accepting that his relationship with Clara was over, and that he needed to move on. One afternoon, as he was reviewing more paperwork in his apartment, there was a knock at the door. Ethan wasn't expecting anyone, but he reluctantly got up to answer. When he opened it, he was shocked to see Clara standing there, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice shaky. "I need to talk to you." The emotions surged inside him: rage, sadness, confusion. But there was something else, too. Beneath the anger, there was still a part of him that loved her. He had to remind himself that this was the same woman who had once meant everything to him. He stepped aside to let her in. They sat in silence for a long time, neither knowing where to begin. Finally, Clara spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I made a terrible mistake, Ethan. I don't know how it happened, but I lost myself. And now, everything is falling apart. I thought I wanted this life, but I've realized that it's not me. I've been trying to prove something to my family, to live up to their expectations, but I've been lying to myself. And to you." Ethan's heart clenched. It was as if Clara was a different person, someone who was finally seeing the truth. But could he trust her again? Could he ever forgive her for what she had done? "I don't know if I can forgive you, Clara," Ethan replied quietly. "You destroyed everything we had. And now, I'm fighting for what's mine, not just the money, but my sense of self. I don't know if there's anything left for us. Clara's eyes filled with tears. I understand. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I'm asking you for one thing, don't fight this for me. Fight it for yourself. You deserve more than this. You deserve peace. Her words hit him like a wave, crashing over him with the force of a storm. For the first time in weeks, Ethan realized that he didn't need to fight for Clara anymore. He had to fight for himself. His life, his future, it was his to reclaim. Goodbye, Clara, Ethan said softly, his voice filled with a mixture of sadness and resolve. I hope you find what you're looking for. But I have to let you go. With that, Clara turned and walked out of his apartment, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts. He knew the legal battle would continue, but something had changed. For the first time in a long time, he felt free. The case was nearing its conclusion. Ethan had made his peace with the emotional aftermath of his relationship with Clara. Now, it was time for the final push in the legal battle. But instead of focusing solely on winning the case, Ethan found himself approaching it with a new mindset, one of self-respect, not vengeance. With the new evidence against James Knight, the case took a dramatic turn. The Knight family's empire began to unravel as more details of their financial wrongdoing were revealed. The courts ruled in Ethan's favor, and he was granted a fair settlement, a percentage of the cryptocurrency investment. But Ethan knew that the true victory wasn't in the money. It was in reclaiming his life, his freedom, and his sense of self-worth. In the end, Ethan didn't just win the battle against Clara and her family. He won the battle against his own pain, his own regrets, and emerged stronger than he had ever been. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this story. If you did, please hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to hear what you think. Your feedback really helps me create better content for you. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an update. Thanks again and see you in the next video. Take care.